Stephanie Dobson is back with us again this week. Stephanie is a lawyer, mediator, and online educator with Hankett Divorce Law and Mediation offices in Lloydminster and Edmonton. Stephanie, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks again, Stacey.
Well, it's another episode of Healthy Thriving Family After Divorce, and we were talking about how January is divorce month and going through some tips this past week. But today we're going to talk about what you do in the initial stages, just when things are getting started. So the first thing I want to ask is if you're considering separating or divorce in the end, what do you suggest is the first step? How do you get started with this process?
Well, usually the making that decision to separate is one of the most difficult things to do. It's one of the most difficult parts of it, embarking on that journey. So, I recommend that even before that final decision is made, you may want to do a few things to become as prepared as possible. And I've got kind of 4 ideas for our viewers. So the first one is to do some research. There's great resources online if you check it out. I certainly recommend that you be careful with what you search for. So if you search respectful divorce or positive divorce resources, you'll find something very different than if you just search out plain divorce or divorce strategy. Of course, my clients are able to use our e-learning platform for separating and divorcing families, and that's a one-stop shop, upanotchlearning.com, as people may be familiar with. Second, books are a great way to dig deeper into the subject. In our e-learning platform, we do have a whole bunch of recommendations for some positive and constructive books around separation and divorce. Third, find supportive people. So there's toxic people in the world and there's supportive people in the world. And so it's really important to find that really small group of people that are going to be exactly what you need during your separation. And fourth, I recommend strongly that you get in with a divorce professional like a lawyer or a mediator, just to learn how divorce works, what some of your entitlements might be, and some other valuable information. And don't forget that you don't necessarily have to hire your lawyer right at the initial consultation. You might just want to get a bit of a lay of the land and understand a little bit more about what your options are, negotiation options, and some more substantive options are as you go forward with your separation eventually.
Now, when you reach out to a law office for the first time, Stephanie, what can you expect?
Well, that's a bit of a difficult one because, of course, every office is just slightly different on how they do their initial client intake. So first, let's talk about how you should contact the office. So there's a few ways, of course. So phone call is, one of the traditional ways to contact a law office. But how do you know if I guess people don't probably have phone books anymore, but how do you know whether you want to phone this office or that office? And so let's dive a little bit deeper. So I highly recommend, I was talking about research a moment ago. I highly recommend that you go to that firm's website and do a little bit of research, check them out, see if their style seems to match what you're looking for. But you can sometimes contact the lawyer or the office directly by email, or sometimes there's even a contact form on the website. And don't forget that you'll learn a lot about that firm. So if you want to figure out, in our office, for example, we do all out of court resolution. So you would find that out from the website. If you call in, you'll want to make sure that you tell them that you're calling them about a separation or divorce, and then they'll put you through to that particular person. And, here's a couple of things that in that initial call that you'll probably find is first thing that they're going to do is they're going to ask you your full name and the other party's full name. And that's for the purpose of what's called a conflict check. So as part of the Law Society, we have to make sure that we're not representing two parties. And so we have to make sure that we haven't heard from the other person. In that initial call, if you do call our office, we only get a couple of sentences as to the situation between you and your spouse. And what we do is we put you straight in for a 5-minute call where I can go into a little bit more detail about our services.
Okay, and when you have that initial consultation, when you first show up to the office, whomever you choose, what do you expect from that consultation? What happens there?
Yeah, so for our process, we break that down into 2 different processes. So when you initially call our office, we'll do what's called a 5-minute call, and that's just for process, and we don't necessarily go into your substantive things of kind of what your story is. But then if our services are appropriate, so if people are looking for that out of court resolution, then we will book you in for that full initial consultation. So that initial consultation is usually about an hour. For us, when we book that consultation, we need 3 things from you. We need our questionnaire to be filled out. we need valid photo ID, and then there might be certain documentation if you've got a draft separation agreement or if you've got an existing court order or something like that that will be specifically asked for from you. You'll have to bring that into the consultation. Then, when you're in the consultation itself, for my consultations, I break them into three parts. So, the first part is the major part, which is substantively what's going on for you. So, we go through what we call your story. So, from your perspective, here's the main topics that we need to cover. So we'll go through things like parenting. We'll talk about finances, and we'll talk about division of your assets and debts, and kind of what the lay of the land is around all of those topics. Secondly, we'll talk about negotiation process. So our viewers are very familiar with us focusing on not just substantive matters, but also process. How do you want to get divorced? Not what do you want in your divorce. So usually we're looking for, if you've chosen the legal process, what does that look like? If you've chosen the collaborative process or mediation process, what does that look like? I want to make sure that we answer all of your questions. And then finally, I'm a task list guru. I always like to make sure that we know our next steps. And so we'll make sure that we talk about those next steps, timing, are you ready to proceed now? Do you want to wait a little bit of time, and that sort of thing. So that's the consultation in a nutshell.
All right, Stephanie. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back to chat with you again next week.
Okay, thanks, Stacey.